This is Dell's response to the MacBook Neo. It has a new Intel chip that actually caught up to Apple Silicon in efficiency. It's not a total victory, but I've been testing this new $699 XPS 13, which is $599 for students and teachers, matching Apple's current Neo pricing. But I don't think this would exist if Apple hadn't launched the Neo back in March. The big question I had is this any better than the stripped-down plasticky Chromebook-style laptops other PC manufacturers sold at this price point in the past? The answer to that is yes. It's not perfect. I mean, neither was the Neo, but I think Dell is having their MacBook Neo moment, and the biggest letdown is only officially supporting Windows. But I got past that. More on Linux in a bit. Before we get started, this laptop is on loan from Dell. I'm sending it back to them and they have no control over what I'm saying. I just wanted to be clear that I didn't buy this, it's a loaner. But in many ways, I think Dell saw the Neo and said, what if we do that, just do everything a little bit better? Like the display has a more matte finish with more resolution. And it's a touchscreen, and 120 Hz with variable refresh rate. Or the keyboard is about on par with Apple's in the field, but it's backlit. Or the trackpad. Well, the trackpad's a little worse. It has that old-style hinged design, meaning that you can't click along the top. But it's overall a pretty good trackpad. But then the ports. They went with two 10 gig USB ports instead of having one that's only USB 2 at 480 megabits. And both of the Dell ports can do display output. Like the Neo, repairs are pretty easy, but unlike the Neo, you get upgradable storage. Not only is there a 512 gig SSD in here, doubling Apple's base storage, but it's faster, and you can upgrade it, like I'm doing here. Now, there are plenty of things that are worse, too, like the speakers. They're a bit lacking compared to the Neo. And they might sound a little bit better under Windows EQ, but the thing that puzzles me most is why didn't Dell include a headphone jack? Laptops are one device, especially like cheap ones that you might see in schools. There's just no excuse to not have a headphone jack on here. And there are fans. They're a mixed blessing. They let the CPU go faster when you're doing a lot of work for a long time, but they're definitely audible. Like at this point, the computer was running for a couple hours and idle, and Windows just decided to start running background updates. And when I started recording this, it popped up this ad for Xbox. That was just a little while after it nagged me to set up OneDrive. Really, the biggest letdown on this thing is that it ships with and only technically supports Windows. Just like with the Neo only supporting macOS natively, the XPS 13 only supports Windows natively. But full support for almost all the hardware is finally in Linux, at least if you're running on a cutting-edge release. I installed Fedora 44, and initially you're missing sound, Wi-Fi, and a few other features, but after plugging in a USB Ethernet adapter and running updates, I got all the hardware working. And once I got Linux working, that's when the fun began. Not games, mind you. I think the biggest letdown with the Intel Core 5 chip in here is the built-in iGPU. It can't hold a candle to Apple's A19. Even running an older game under Proton, like Halo Reach, I had to bump settings way down to 720p before it did stop being choppy. And every GPU benchmark I ran on here put the Dell way behind the Mac. Apple has some serious GPU horsepower in their mobile chips. One of the worst showings there on the XPS 13 was Gravity Mark, which is almost entirely GPU bound. In this, the Mac almost doubled Dell's score. But the thing that surprised me most about this laptop was what happened when I ran my other benchmarks, especially the top 500 supercomputing benchmark. This benchmark hammers the CPU as hard as possible and also fills up the memory. I mean, it's only 8 gigs and the CPU throttles down after 10 seconds to settle in at 20 watts. But I don't know what changed at Intel. Apparently, they started caring about efficiency. Because this laptop crushes every other x86 chip I've ever tested for compute efficiency. I reran all my tests on just the 4 E cores, the ones that are supposed to use less power for background tests. I also ran them just on the performance cores, and even with just those two sets of cores separately, this laptop is one of the most efficient computers I've ever tested, even beating most of Apple's Apple Silicon Macs. And I like that. That means all-day battery, at least if you're not running benchmarks all day. But the thing I'm most excited about is if Intel can make a follow-up to their N100 chips with these newer efficiency cores. They're pretty much as efficient as ARM cores now, and they're on par with Apple's M series, at least on the low end, and at least in the benchmarks I've been running. And the idle power draw in here is great too, matching Apple at under a watt without the display turned on. With the display at half brightness, it's about the same at 4 watts. And just to be complete, Wi-Fi 7 on here is also pretty power efficient, with the laptop only using a few watts to hit 1 gigabit of transfer speeds, which again matches the Neo. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is still a low-end laptop. Part of the reason it's so efficient is because it clocks down a lot to save power. That's great for a laptop though, and outside of the pathetic GPU performance, I don't have any real gripes for the price that you're paying for this thing. The fact I could just pop out the drive Dell shipped, swap in my own, and install Linux on it, that's what makes this even more valuable. I really wish I could install Linux on the Neo. Even without some of Apple's little efficiency tweaks, Linux gives me the ability to use my computer in so many different ways, and it extends the life almost indefinitely. Long after Apple and Microsoft drop support for both of these laptops, Linux is going to carry on. So for that alone, not to mention the backlit keyboard, better display, upgradable SSD, and dual 10 gigabit USB ports, I think I can recommend this XPS 13 to anyone who's looking for a budget computer in that $700 price range. It's not perfect, and the Neo still has some charms, especially that nice trackpad and the snappy GPU, but this XPS 13 is honestly better than I expected coming into this. Until next time, I'm Jeff Geerling.